Next, we turn to a panel titled Identity and Power, Who Gets to Be an American? This session will be moderated by Julia McDonald Nieto Del Rio, immigration reporter at the Boston Globe, and features an outstanding lineup of speakers. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Julia and our panelists.
Hello, thank you all so much for being here. I'm gonna let all the panelists introduce themselves and then we'll get quickly into the questions. But yeah, would you like to start, Council President?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I am Rutzi Louisiane, at-large city councilor and president of the Boston City Council, proud Bostonian, born and raised Mattapan and Hyde Park, and proud daughter of immigrants from Haiti.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Pavan Dhingra. I am the Vice President of Equity and Inclusion at Amherst College and a professor of American Studies there.
Good afternoon, buenas tardes. My name is Ivan Espinosa Madrigal. I'm the Executive Director of Lawyers for Civil Rights. We provide free legal support to low-income people, people of color, and immigrants.
Thank you all so much. If we could start with having a conversation about how what it means to be an American has shifted over the last 10 months under the Trump administration. What changes have you all seen in that realm?
There have been a number of changes that are unfortunate for so many of our communities. We see very real attempts at implementing Project 2025, of having a version of America that is rooted in white nationalism. While there's been so much work done over the last 5 decades and more to really make this multiracial, multi-class democracy, this project that we're working on collectively work, we've seen a lot of that, an attempt to erase a lot of that. And it's been really challenging on a personal level. It's been challenging on a political level. It's not the America that I was made to believe in. And so the attempt to change what it means to be American is also deeply hypocritical. Because unless, and you raise your hand if you are native or indigenous to this land, or if you were brought here, the descendants of those who were brought here by force via chattel slavery, African American. Unless you fall into one of those two categories, you have a voluntary immigration story. You come from a voluntary immigration story here. And so this xenophobia, this hatred that we're seeing towards Haitians, towards Latinos, towards all immigrants in this country is hypocritical to who we are as a country.
Thank you so much, Council President. Ivan, I know you've been working a lot with immigrant communities in Massachusetts. You always have, but I know things have ramped up in the past few months. How have you seen the notion of what it means to be an American change in your work?
It's challenging to come from a place where many people felt safe and secure to a place where, fast forward 10 months, and even people who are documented immigrants are taking their passport and other identity document, putting it in their purse, in their briefcase, on their person, to make sure that if they have an encounter with law enforcement, to make sure that if they have an encounter with ICE, that they can have proof of their lawful status. That is not the type of environment and the type of climate that I want to live in, that other people should be living in. This sense of fear and dread that you're under intense scrutiny, that the specter of immigration enforcement looms over you, and that at any moment, immigration will take action against you, even if you have documented status. And that's something that we have seen time and time again at Lawyers for Civil Rights during the course of the last 10 months. Because some of the clients who we represent right now are documented immigrants who have been rounded up by ICE, even detained and locked up overnight while their immigration status is investigated and clarified or confirmed, whatever you want to call it, and those people have lawful status and are still being subjected to cruel and inhumane treatment, all at the hands of the federal government. So it's hard to look at the world around us and say, you're a part of this country and you belong here and you too are American and you should share in the rights and privileges that are afforded to all other Americans, when there are people who are being treated that way just based on how they look or the color of their skin.
Thank you, Ivan. And Dr. Dhingra, I want to turn to you. Immigration policy and the attacks from the Trump administration on higher education have been really intertwined. What kinds of effects have you seen of these shifting policies on university campuses and colleges like Amherst?
The Trump administration's attacks on higher ed are part of a broader attack on so much of what we want to accomplish in American history and American identity. To some degree, to a large degree, unfortunately, the attacks we're seeing by the Trump administration on immigrants is not new historically. We excluded Chinese immigrants 100 plus years ago. We've interned our own people. What's going on right now in the Trump administration is not new. What's unfortunate and what we have to take action against is not just the detainments that we're seeing, but as you've said, how many of our lawful residents here are being detained. The Turkish student at Tufts University was detained, separated from her campus by hundreds of miles just for an op-ed that she co-wrote in a student newspaper, right? So universities, students on universities are very worried that despite, coming to this country to study, to improve their, chances, being welcomed by the universities, right? That anything they do on social media or otherwise can be cause for them to be detained. We're seeing lots of questions and concerns impacting universities around their immigrant status of their students, faculty, and staff. ICE agents, when showing up on or near campuses, have the same kind of, quite the same kind of fears as they do elsewhere in the country, right? People who teach on these matters have to be worried about what they teach can be shared in ways that misconstrue, misrepresent what's going on in the classrooms. So there's a chilling effect, not just on those who are most impacted, but it permeates out from around that.
Thank you. Kind of continuing on that theme of who is welcome here and who is not, what shifts have you all seen among immigrant communities in Massachusetts in terms of going about their everyday lives? I mean, how are immigrant communities, including immigrant students on campus, being affected by these policy changes?
I'm sure that there are people here who can talk about how their workplaces have changed as a result of immigrants fearing that they won't have a job or their work permits being pulled. Although they were brought here lawfully, they came here lawfully with work authorization, that being pulled by the inhumane policies of the Trump administration. We are seeing the numbers reflected in our schools, where we have a drop in enrollment, or there's certain days where in certain cities where there's a raid that people believe is going to happen, where you see a precipitous drop in attendance by our students who need to be learning. Talk about the work that we'll have to do to make up for that learning loss. When we talk about entire cities who canceled their Latino Heritage Month celebrations, right? This is not normal, and we can't accept it as such. And it is true that this is not we've seen this before, but we've also, I've thought that we've left some of this in the past, right? A Supreme Court okaying racial profiling, which I believed, the lawyer in me was like, wait, I thought there was Karamatsu, then internment of our own people, where we decided that these sort of race-based discrimination against members is not okay. And we are seeing left and right that being cut down, and that leading to, what else would it lead to but for fear in our communities? You know, I have to deal with, I'm hearing that there's an ICE sighting in so-and-so location, getting on the phone with the nonprofit, getting on the phone with the Boston Police Department to try to figure out, is that real or is that fear? And trying to not be upset when it's a false alarm, because you have to understand the real fear that immigrant communities are living with, because their communities, their families, their homes are being torn apart.
Thank you so much, Council President. I think as journalists, I definitely try, not to fearmonger, but in the past few months, I mean, as you said, even just suspected ICE raids or hearing rumors, these have really blown up because these cases for these families and the ones that you all have spoken to, the ones that I have spoken to, they really are tragic and heartbreaking. Ivan, I'm wondering about the rhetoric, and I'm going a little off script here, apologies, but the rhetoric you're seeing from the Trump administration, from DHS, on social media when they are commenting on cases, is that different from what we saw during the first Trump administration? How has that escalated?
And I want to quickly answer the question that you had posed before about
Sure.
how this is manifesting on the ground. And one example to complement what the Council President just mentioned is also the impact on the economy. When you have large numbers of immigrants who, like the Council President said, were here on work visas or on student visas, and they are now being deported or in fear of deportation, that destabilizes entire economic sectors. And in Massachusetts, for example, where TPS recipients from Haiti are well represented in the healthcare industry, eliminating TPS has an impact on healthcare. It has an impact on your access to a nurse, has impact on many different elements of our day-to-day lives. And to your other question about what's happening right now with rhetoric, the problem is that instead of talking about it as we don't want Haitian people here because they're black, which is exactly what the government is doing, they say we don't want these people here because they're criminals. And that is gross mischaracterization of entire communities. And painting them as criminal or undesirable is deeply harmful. And it permeates in other ways. It provokes racism. It invites discrimination against these people in other spaces. And instead of talking about them in ways that emphasize their contributions, for example, with the Haitian Americans in the healthcare industry, we talk about them as a drain, as criminality. And that is where the federal government has been going, and that's extremely dangerous. And we have to push back hard against that gross mischaracterization of these people who are here productively and who are contributing to our economy and our society.
Right, and we also know that many folks who came here legally and through the right pathways are now losing their status and their jobs, for example, in healthcare because of, the administration cutting parole programs and all of that sort of thing. And Dr. Dhingra, what's the consequence, and for students and others, what is going to be the consequence of these folks leaving the economy, of students potentially, not wanting to come study in the U.S. anymore? What are you thinking in terms of the future and the consequences of these policies?
I know that there's been a lot of rhetoric that international students are taking spots away from U.S. students. We have to understand the big picture around this, right? About 18% of students in post-secondary education in Massachusetts are international. At Amherst College, it's about 13% are international students. Right? International students contribute over $40 billion to our economy nationwide, right? These are the ones who are coming here, they're getting advanced degrees, college degrees, and a lot of them stay, right? And they contribute to industries that we all kind of take pride in having it in the Boston area, right? Or that are working in industries across the country. When they go back to their homelands, in some ways, they're great ambassadors of our nation to their homelands. It's a soft power kind of effort, right? This is one of our best exports in many ways. And we have to realize that when we make it harder to get a visa, for student visas, when we make students fear going home over summer breaks, when we make employers pay $100,000 for an H-1 visa, right? Therefore limiting the prospects of our international students having jobs when they graduate, all we're doing is hurting ourselves, right? In our education. All the pathways we're not creating, all the breakthroughs that are not going to happen, right? And all the kind of cultural exchange we'll have on our campuses. Okay? There's so many costs to this beyond the financial that a really kind of nativist rhetoric does not capture and is misleading us into an us versus them mindset. Right? And one of the great things about education, about college campuses, is that it really does push back on an us versus them mindset. It's one of the few places you can be, right, where you really are challenged to think together on complicated issues, right, and create shared solutions, right? And international students contribute to that. They make our own domestic students better in the process, and vice versa, right? And this is one of the many things we're losing, given the rhetoric that was just described and the impacts on the communities that was described.
Thank you so much. I'm going to end with this question before the Q&A, but personally for each of you, if you don't mind sharing, what does being an American encompass for you? Any personal experiences that stand out to you or that you can think of? What does it for you personally mean to be an American?
Well, in the very definition of what it means to be American is that there's elasticity there. It has to be big enough to include a lot of different people, right? I love the hyphen, that I can be Haitian-American and what that means. Undergrad, I studied culture in other countries, in France, studied abroad in Senegal, and one of the things that I loved about that comparative lens is that, wow, I love that I can be American and that is inclusive of all of who I am. That means that I'm Haitian, that means that that I'm a Black woman, that I can be all of these things and be all of these things freely. The whole idea, whether we're talking about what it means to be an American or what it means to be a Bostonian, is that no one person, no one identity group has a sense of ownership over what that means. That there's room enough for all of us, right? It's not this us versus them, right? It's not this zero-sum game. There's room for everyone in this identity that is part of this project of democracy. I'll just say this, my parents came from Haiti. I was born here. 2 years ago, we had our first Haitian night at Fenway. There's nothing more American or more Bostonian than a game at Fenway, cheering on the Red Sox. My mom's doctor is right across the street. She came to that Red Sox game. A number of other Haitians came to that Red Sox game. Dr. Gabot, who I'm on the phone with all the time at the Immigrant Family Services Institute in this audience. So many Haitian people who've lived here for decades told me that they never felt more American, that they never felt more Bostonian and more proud than they were at that Haitian cultural night at the Boston Red Sox, cheering on a team that they've never felt a connection to until there was a platform made for them to be like, no, this is your park too. You belong here too. That the Red Sox and singing Sweet Caroline, that you can do that too. And I never want to know a city and I never want to know a country that is not making room for that hyphenated identity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. As an immigrant also, and coming from a family that fled Central America because of instability in the region, it's really challenging to look at the world around us and not almost feel like I am now working in a very similar space where even access to justice is extremely contested, where the courthouse door is increasingly being closed by the federal government on people. And that's a terrible, terrible sensation, because being here, being in the United States and growing up primarily here, my experience was one where there's room for all of us here. And that's important. It's important for us not to lose that, because that's not just a defining character of being American, but of our cornerstone of constitutionality, of democracy, of all of these things that are here that didn't exist in Central America and that still don't exist. And so we need to protect that, and that means protecting what makes us American, which is our respect for institutions, among many other things. So we need to really lean into those values.
Thank you, Ron.
Before I moved to Massachusetts, about 10, 12 years ago, I took a break from being a professor and I worked for a couple years at the Smithsonian. And what I love about the Smithsonian is also what I love about this country. That we have museums at the Smithsonian dedicated to the African American experience, the Native American experience, and other kinds of identities and histories. And in those museums, if you haven't been, first of all, they're free, which demonstrates the kind of access people want to create in this country to learning. But these museums, those two in particular, right, have been able to reconstruct a narrative of this country that centers their experiences in ways that shine real critique on other narratives of our country. What I'm trying to get at is, what I love about America is that we are a place that allows for that. We are a place that will allow people to embrace alternative notions of our country and engage in those ideas and have that back and forth. We even created a museum about this, funded by the government, right? And that's really unique. I don't know other countries that do that, and they make it free for you to go to. And so when I'm in higher ed at Amherst College, one of the things I really appreciate is that we do try to engage in difficult ideas. And this country, at its best, does that too. We create those spaces. And so what I really worry about in this current administration is a rewriting of history, a single narrative of history that dilutes and actually does not do justice to what people have actually learned about how this country came to be. Right? So what I really like about this country is under threat right now, and that's what worries me the most.
Thank you all so much. I think we have time for one quick Q&A question for whoever wants to take it. But we know that pathways to citizenship, pathways to becoming legal in the US are difficult and take a long time. We have a question here about how we can address the issue of folks being unlawfully present in the United States in a way that won't infringe on the quote-unquote rights of law-abiding immigrants. So, in what ways would you all see or hope for progress in terms of all these folks, too, who may not have a legal status right now, but have been here for 20, 30 years and want to contribute to the economy and all of the things we just talked about?
I'll just say that we need our leaders to lead on Capitol Hill and not to fearmonger, not to engage in racist tactics. If there's an economic argument for immigration, there's a moral argument for immigration, and I don't think any of us will tell you that we have a perfect immigration system. It's deeply, deeply broken. I'm not sure when the last immigration bill came out of DC. So we need leaders who will fix a broken system to give a pathway to citizenship, to legalization to those who are here and want that, and create a system that allows people to make what is their lawful right, an asylum claim, if they're fleeing from danger, as we see folks coming from Venezuela, from Haiti, from all around the country and world. Instead of a travel ban, how are we allowing them to make asylum claims? And so I think we need leadership, and we need leadership to make sure that we are actually engaging in immigration reform.
Thank you.
And to add to that, to realign immigration policy with what it really means to have family reunification. It shouldn't take 10 years for you to get your wife or your parents to the United States, right? So that long line, that long waiting period and process, we can do better. We can do better for people who are already waiting in line, and we can do better for people who have viable asylum claims, incredible asylum claims. And we need to realign the immigration process to also better fill the economic need that we have in the country. So make jobs connected to immigration.
The only thing I would add, I love both those comments, is that we shouldn't draw too stark of a line between documented and undocumented immigrants, right? Our industries, our companies benefit from both and take advantage of both, right? People who come here without documents are still find work. Many industries depend on this, right? So our country depends on both kinds of immigration, and to draw a clear line between them and judge one better than judge the other one worse, and I think it does not do a service neither to the immigrants themselves nor to our reality that we depend on both.
Thank you all so much for the thoughtful panel, and yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you all learned something. I know I did, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.